she started getting what she quoted as creeped out, and advised him that they were not friends, they were just acquaintances from the gym. This seemed to kind of, for a couple of days, interrupt this, but then he continued to approach her, asking for selfie photos, asking for her phone number, asking to just have her, about offering up his phone number to her, which again, she would just act like she didn't hear him.
You are so sexy. You are so pretty. You're gonna someday get hurt because of your prettiness. Things like that triggered me into feeling like I don't know who he is, but I am very uncomfortable. And at the same time, I didn't know who he was.
Tonight, a suspect in another Utah cold case is back in prison. The Ogden man is profiled in KSL's podcast series called Cold. We're talking about Cary Hartmann, who police once called the Ogden City Rapist. He served more than 30 years for charges of sexual assault and burglary dating all the way back to the 80s. Utah Board of Pardons and Parole releasing him in 2020. But just last month, a parole officer visited Hartmann's condo and discovered he had allegedly bypassed content filters on his TV and his phone to access pornography, something the 75-year-old is prohibited from doing because he is a registered sex offender. Police in Roy also considered Hartmann a suspect in the unsolved 1985 disappearance of his girlfriend, Cherie Warren. You can learn more about the Warren case in season 3 of the Cold podcast.
And you can't make it up. Yes, they paroled this serial rapist. Now, he was convicted of 4 violent sexual assaults, but he was actually a suspect in over 14. And as you heard, a suspect in killing someone. These are 14 unsolved rapes and a homicide. They have a show on him, which I'll put a link to the description if you want to see it. Now, while he was out on parole, he started to repeat the habits of old. You see, all those years ago, before he was convicted, he would go through the phone book and call his victims and taunt them in some ways similar to the Golden State Killer. Also, what's similar is that he was a reserve police officer. Ain't that a thing? He was paroled. Now he's facing a parole revocation hearing, which is very much like a court proceeding. So we're going to see the witnesses brought up, the detectives, and his defense attorney. Well, she's going to do the best that she can. I'll tell you the results of the hearing at the end.
On record.
Good afternoon. I'm Greg Johnson, a member of the Board of Pardons and Parole. And today is the evidentiary hearing set for Cary W Hartmann, offender number 44508. Is that you, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Obviously, we're on video today. So if at any point you can't hear or see, please let staff know so we can get that fixed. All right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'll note that you're present. Your attorney, Ms. Kate Conyers, is representing you. Jan Ferris is representing the state, and Brandon Adair, APMP agent, is online. We have some witnesses as well, and we'll get to those introductions in just a minute. Counsel, are there any preliminary matters?
Not on my end.
I believe we'll have to invoke the exclusionary rule. As
Thank you.
We do have, I don't think Ms. Conyers was here for this, but we have an investigator with Weber County Attorney's Office who actually is acting as a witness rather than the case agent today. And then he happens to have 3 witnesses / alleged victims who are there with him. And so I'm sure Member Johnson can help us logistically to find a way to exclude all of them and make sure they're not listening to each other's testimony. And then our APMP agent, Adair, is the case agent, and I would ask that he be allowed to be present for the remainder.
Okay. Ms. Conyers, any objection to that?
No, we would also invoke the exclusionary rule, if that sounds fair. And then we will also stipulate to identification.
Okay. So noted on the identification. On the exclusionary rule, I'm going to wait just a minute. I want to get through our preliminary matters that don't have to do with witness testimony, and then we will invoke that rule. So today is set for an evidentiary hearing. Mr. Hartman, let's go ahead and get you sworn in. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear to tell the truth and be accurate in today's proceeding?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. You can put your hand down. Now, did you receive at least 7 days' notice of this hearing?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And your counsel is present. Have you had enough time to consult with your counsel?
Yes,
Okay. Do you feel like you're prepared to proceed?
yes,
Okay. Now, the board discloses the information we may be relying on to make a decision, and that's usually called the blue packet. Have you received your disclosure, Mr. Hartman?
yes.
And have you reviewed it?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Any questions or concerns about what is in your disclosure?
No,
Okay. All right. Do you feel like you're prepared to proceed today?
yes,
Okay. So just a little bit of history here. You were paroled March of 2020. So you'd been out for several years. APMP submitted a warrant request, an affidavit. The board found probable cause to issue that warrant on April 12th, 2024, and you were returned to prison. There have been a couple hearings on that. You have admitted to allegations 1 and 2 and pled no contest to allegation 3, but allegation 4 was denied and an evidentiary hearing was requested, which is what we're here for today. At an evidentiary hearing, the standards of proof are different. Rather than a criminal court case, it's proof by a preponderance of evidence, which is more likely than not that the violation occurred. Some of the rules of evidence are also different, but that's what we'll be doing today. And one of those rules we need to talk about is the exclusionary rule, which counsel has asked that we invoke. That means that the witnesses are not all sitting in the same room testifying on video, and that they would be in a place that they couldn't hear or see what was going on. So I believe, is it Detective Haney?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you in a place, I know you're all together on that video, that the witnesses could be moved to a different room where they couldn't hear and see, and then be brought back in one at a time as requested?
Yes, sir, we can do that. We can move everybody out to the lobby area. We're just inside the conference room at the Weber County Attorney's Office, so we can move to the sitting area outside, and we can be brought in one at a time. How are you going to let us know? Because I assume that I'm a part of the being excluded. We'll all have to step out. How do you want to let us know that you're ready for us?
Well, one way to do that is Mr. Ferris will tell us who the first witness he's going to call is, and that person can remain in the room. The others would leave, and then when that witness is done, that witness would leave the room and send in the next one.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Ferris, who do you plan to call first?
And we actually would call Detective Haney as our first witness. On this case, I might ask that we be allowed a brief opening statement, just to maybe help things flow better when the time's appropriate.
Yeah, we will do that. So let's go ahead and invoke the exclusionary rule right now. So Detective Haney, if you could ask the other witnesses to please leave the room and let us know when that's done.
You guys get out to the lobby area. Yes. Thanks. Yeah, just head straight out that door there. Okay, I was able to have them step out to the lobby area.
Okay, thank you. So we'll continue now. So Mr. Hartman, you do have the right to an evidentiary hearing, which is today. As I've mentioned, it's proof by a preponderance of evidence. You have the right to an attorney who is with you today, who will be able to hear and cross-examine the witnesses and examine any exhibits. During this evidentiary portion, Mr. Hartman, you do have the right to speak or not speak on your own behalf and the right to present your own evidence. We'll be proceeding with that today. Also, a reminder that the board has jurisdiction up into the maximum of your sentence, which is a life top sentence. So, counsel, anything else before we proceed to opening arguments?
Can I ask who Mr. Pitt is?
Well, I'll go ahead and answer that. The name Jamie Pitt is the person signed in on the computer at the Weber County Attorney's Office. I believe that's an administrative
okay.
assistant.
So that's Mr. Haney, the investigator.
That's Mr. Haney.
Okay, I was just
Okay.
making sure. Thank you. Nothing else before we start. And I know Mr. Ferris wants to give an opening statement. I will wait.
Okay. Mr. Ferris, time for the opening statement. Please proceed.
Thank you. Thought it might be helpful to start with a bit of a roadmap on how the state sees the case in our presentation going today. As Board Member Johnson previously stated, we're here solely on allegation 4, which is by having committed or by having been convicted of a new criminal offense or violation, here to wit, stalking, in violation of parole agreement. And so in this case, criminal charges have not been filed on this particular, stalking allegations have not been filed. I don't believe they will be filed. The allegations are fairly old, and I feel like if they were going to be filed, they would have been filed by now. But the way the allegation reads, it would be a violation just to have committed stalking. And so in a review of state statute of stalking 76-5-106.5 stalking, it's several different things. The traditional violation of an injunction that was issued by a court, either a permanent criminal stalking injunction or other stalking injunction. We don't have that here. And so to narrow our argument and to focus here today, the definition of stalking continues to say an actor commits stalking if the actor intentionally or knowingly engages in a course of conduct directed at a specific individual and knows or is reckless as to whether the course of conduct would cause a reasonable person to fear for the individual's own safety or the safety of a third person, or to suffer other emotional distress. And so as we talk to the detective today and the alleged victim, and I guess we could even probably say the 3 alleged victims that show up in his report that was filed as part of our proposed exhibit list, we feel we will be able to persuade the board that these victims did feel for their own safety, and that the conduct of the offender actually did cause emotional distress to these victims. And along with that, all the victims listed in Detective Haney's report are here, and as we know, they're sequestered. I am going to call him as our first witness and ask him some questions, and I would just let the parties know that if he talks about conversations with the 3 alleged victims, they are here available to testify, and we plan to have them testify to clear up any potential hearsay objections at the onset. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Ms. Conyers, you're still waiving your opening?
Yes, thank you for asking.
Okay. Mr. Ferris, you've already said that Detective Haney will be your first witness, so I'll go ahead and swear him in. Detective Haney, will you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear to tell the truth and be accurate in today's proceeding?
I do.
Okay, thank you. You can put your hand down. And would you please state your name and title again for the record?
My title is investigator. It's Steve Haney, SteveHaney.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ferris?
Thank you. Investigator Haney, could you, even though many of us know, can you tell us where you're currently employed?
The Weber County Attorney's Office.
Thank you. In what capacity?
I am the investigator, one of the investigators with the Weber County Attorney's Office.
Thank you. Do you have approximately how long have you been so employed?
I've been with Weber County for 28 years, and the last 5.5 were with the Weber County Attorney's Office. 23 years prior to that were at the Weber County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you. Do you have other law enforcement agency with other experience with other agencies?
Just interagency, attached to task force with the FBI and the Marshal's Office.
Very well. Thank you. As we're here today, you provided, isn't it true that you provided me with a narrative of a case file that you're working on that I have titled as Kate Bell? Does that sound familiar?
Yes, sir.
And are you indeed investigating, or have you in the past investigated a case by the name Kate Bell?
Yes.
Thank you. If you could chronologically tell us about that investigation as it relates to the offender that brings us here today. And actually, defense counsel has waived us going through a colloquy to have you specifically identify the offender. But could you tell us by name who is listed as a suspect in your investigation?
Cary Hartmann.
Thank you. And is it your understanding that's the offender that brings us here today for this hearing?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. So if you could chronologically just give us a narrative hitting the points that are important that would be important to the Board of Pardons and Parole, and I may ask you some additional questions, and Ms. Conyers may have questions as well. But if you could just tell us your involvement and what brings us here today.
In May of 2021, I was contacted by Lieutenant Mike Runkles of the Ogden City Police Department, who advised me that he had a sergeant from the UHP contact him asking about Cary Hartmann and if he had any knowledge of an investigation going into him, and started to report that his neighbor, who is Kate Bell, had come to him asking advice on some inappropriate behavior that had been happening at the Vasa gym on 12th Street. I was currently investigating Cary Hartmann, and I went and I talked to Kate Bell at her house, and she told me that she works out at the Vasa, and she had been approached by an older man. And he seemed friendly enough, and she was like, okay, I'll be friendly back. And they started talking every day. He would approach her, and he would be asking about her personal life, and which she thought at the time was harmless, until this same person, Cary Hartmann, showed up at her work, the Buckle store in the Newgate Mall. And he had shown up a couple of times asking for her. She was not currently in the store, but she was told later that he had shown up. And when told that she was not there, according to the workers, he got a little upset, but left. And she showed a picture to the people of Cary Hartmann, and they agreed that was him who had came in.
Can I ask you a real quick question?
Yes.
Did I catch that you said that Kate Bell and her husband contacted their neighbor who is in law enforcement?
Yes.
And so do you know if Kate Bell is in fact married?
Yes.
And do you know if at any point she gave her phone number out to Mr. Hartmann?
She had not.
Okay, thanks. Sorry to interrupt. If you could just continue with your narrative, thank you.
Yes, and that was one of the things that every day Hartmann would ask her. for her phone number at the gym, which she continued to, according to her, she would just pretend like she didn't hear him and just would keep talking. When she ran into Mr. Hartman the next couple days at the gym, he even admitted, "I was at your work, you were not there." And she started getting what she quoted as creeped out, and advised him that they were not friends, they were just acquaintances from the gym. This seemed to kind of, for a couple of days, interrupt this, but then he continued to approach her, asking for selfie photos, asking for her phone number, asking to just have her, about offering up his phone number to her, which again, she would just act like she didn't hear him. About the same period of time, she was at the Buckle working, and she received a phone call, which the person, the manager answered, not Kate. Another worker answered. Kate was asked for by name by a male. Kate went to the phone and picked up the phone, and the person started specifically asking about the mannequin in the window and if it was for sale, and then started asking what was the mannequin's underwear. And at that point, she just hung up because she didn't specifically think that she just thought it was a prank, until she started talking to me, and I started asking if she had received any suspicious phone calls. Then about a week later, Mr. Hartman approached her and said that he was very despondent. He was going to be on the subject of a KSL broadcast, and that he was not very happy, but that's when Kate realized who Cary Hartman was and that he had been to prison for crimes. Around that same period of time, Hartman approached her and actually told her that Satan had come to see him and that he had looked at pornography. And he quoted to her very coldly, "You are going to get hurt because you are so pretty." And that, and then again started trying to get her phone number, and then quote, he needed to pay the Pied Piper, which she had no idea what he was referring to. This is when Kate sought out assistance from law enforcement, tried to get advice from the neighbor who's a sergeant with UHP, which led me to go and interview her. When I'm interviewing her and I learn about this phone call to the Buckle Corporation, I got the records from the Buckle in that same time period. And there's not a lot of phone calls due to cell phones being, what they are today. Nobody calls into the store. It's very rare. So I was able to gauge about the time period of when she said the call came in, and I found a specific call, and the phone number came back to a Google Voice number. Every other number I was able to match up with legitimate business calls, except for that one number. So in further speaking with Kate and about how she's on the social media, and we started talking about these strange phone calls, she realized that a couple of her friends had just mentioned to her that they had received strange phone calls. And one of them would be Paige Treasure, who's also here today. Paige is a Facebook friends with Kate. And if you look at Kate's Facebook page, there's no privacy, there's no protections. It has all her friends listed, and also Paige comments and likes posts that Kate puts up there. And if you click on Paige's Facebook page, she is in real estate. And if you click on it, her phone number right up top, call me for your realtor questions. Talking to Paige about her strange phone calls, Paige told me that she started getting strange calls and texts. They were intimate questions that about lingerie, about what she liked, what she disliked, and the multiple calls that she got. They were all from different numbers that were from prefixes out of the state, and they were always different, but the language was always the same, and it seemed to be coming from the same person. And every time they would start to talk about lingerie and then start to talk about sex, and then she would immediately be like, "Stop! I'm going to contact law enforcement," and then they would go away. But then again, it started to come back a few days from a different number. All these appear to be Google numbers as well. I talked to another woman who also is in real estate, Yvonne Tams, who's also here today as well. She's also listed by phone through Facebook and attached to Kate Bell's friends, and they're very good friends. And she's clicked on, liked her posts. And again, you click on her name, there is her realtor phone number. She received a phone call from an unknown number, unknown male, started to act like they knew each other prior, and then it went into a sexual nature, and again, revolving around underwear, and Yvonne hung up. And that was the only call that she got. Paige received many, Yvonne just received one.
Can I interrupt you real quick for a question?
Sure.
Thank you. So is it fair to say there's a common denominator in the story that you've told so far, starting with Kate at Buckle, the number that came through Buckle to talk about the mannequin and the lingerie. So we have lingerie and Google Vault tied to Buckle. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then we go to one of Kate's Facebook friends that happens to list their number. And that is Paige, who we'll hear from later. And in that conversation, we have the two common denominators. We have conversations of a sexual nature / lingerie, and a number that's a Google Vault number.
Yes.
Okay. And then finally, we have another Facebook friend of Kate's named Yvonne Tams, and she, same common denominator, phone calls from a man talking about of a sexual nature, talking about lingerie, and coming back to a Google Vault number.
Yes.
And in fairness, I'll ask the question, were you able to ever trace the Google Vault numbers to an individual?
No, I was not.
Okay, thank you for answering that, and you can continue with your narrative.
What I did next was I talked to AP&P agent Zach Thomas, and I requested that that a home visit be done to Cary Hartmann, and part of his parole agreement was that his cell phone would be made available. I asked Agent Thomas if he would look through that phone, and also he actually even obtained a search warrant to image that phone through a Celebrite machine. What we found was that through in Hartmann's phone, he had downloaded and deleted the Google Voice app multiple times during the same time period. And because you delete it, the history and anything that we could find where it wouldn't save on the imaging, and we couldn't see exactly which ones he would use. But ultimately, the only reason to be deleting it would be to hide it.
So in your experience of over 20 years in law enforcement, investigating and detective and investigator, many of that, if someone had a cell phone, why would they need an app to have a Google phone number if they have a cell phone and could just make a phone call on the cell phone? Why would a person do that, if you know?
Many different people use it to hide their phone number. And I mean, if you just look at the even if you Google Google phone numbers, Google voice numbers, it'll say it's for the purpose of making your phone number not known, and having another number come up on the caller ID that's not attached to your phone number.
Thank you. Continue if you have any more in your narrative. Thanks.
Yes, it wasn't attached directly to this Google Voice number, no, but we know that he was downloading it and he was deleting it. This behavior is consistent with clear back in 1986, where he was making these phone calls to his victims prior to them being sexually assaulted. This behavior, the pattern of the pornography, the lingerie phone calls that quickly turn sexual in nature. This is exactly the same behavior. This is putting the public at risk. This is why I started looking into it, to look at everything leading along these three ladies and why this was happening. These sex phone calls, they just don't happen these days anymore. This is a thing of the past, but it's popping back up. And it is since he's been locked up, we don't have him anymore. So it's straight. That seems also interesting to my investigation as well.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions of this witness at this time.
Okay, Ms. Conyers?
Yes, so investigator, or is your title investigator?
It
Mr.
is.
Heine?
I'm also known
Or,
as a detective as well.
Detective Heine, thank you. Are you an expert on Google Voice?
No, I'm not.
Okay. I mean, isn't it just as many illegitimate purposes, there could be just as many legitimate purposes to have a Google Voice number, right?
Yes.
I mean, an obvious example may be something just as simple as only wanting to carry around one device so you can have a Google number so that you can get multiple phone numbers, like say a small law firm business could have a Google number so that I only have to carry around one phone. Wouldn't you say that's probably a good example of why you would have a Google Voice phone number?
It could be, yes.
Okay. So you're saying that you couldn't get a lot of information. So how do you know that Google Voice was having a Google Voice number? Is that itself a violation of parole?
No.
Okay.
And not that
How
I
do you?
have to defer to the AP&P agent on that one, but I'm not sure if it is or not.
Fair enough. How do you know that it was downloaded multiple times?
From what I was told from the imaging of the phone, you could see that it had been downloaded and deleted. Agent Thomas saw that it had been downloaded and deleted multiple times.
Okay. Could you verify the dates and times and see whether that lined up with any of these calls that were received either at Buckle or by Paige or by
No.
Yvonne?
No.
Okay. Why not?
I don't know if it was stored. I didn't review the imaging. I'm also relying on what Agent Thomas viewed on the phone and told me, that that portion of it being downloaded and deleted, it didn't have a timestamp on it.
And why isn't it that you couldn't pull the phone numbers for Google Voice?
Pull them from where?
I mean, I guess maybe I don't know completely. I'm not an expert on Google Voice. I'm asking, since you seem to be the investigator here, the detective, why couldn't you? It seems like you were able to identify one Google phone number that Mr. Hartman was utilizing. Is that correct?
I wasn't able to identify any of them.
Why?
I was able, the one number that came into the Buckle, and it's a Google Voice number. From what I'm learning now is we now have the capability to pull things from the cloud. But at that time, I don't think that we were able to, or even had the knowledge that you could. A lot of these things, this technology is fast advancing. At the time, I contacted Google, and it's a Google number. It wasn't attached to anything that I could follow up on.
You couldn't subpoena that information whatsoever?
Not that I was aware of at that time.
How were you able to verify it was a Google number?
Through the phone records that we got from the Buckle and that number. And then I had the Real-Time Crime Center, which is in Ogden, run that number, and it came back registered to a Google number.
Okay.
Google
So
number,
let's
which
talk
is,
about that Buckle. Go ahead.
that number, those numbers get recycled. If somebody downloads it and it's there and then it gets put back on there, it gets recycled again, and therefore other people are using it. From what I understand, like I said, I'm not an expert. These are things that I've just been told by people who know more than I do about them.
It's not like a new number is populated every single time somebody makes a phone call, right?
That's what I understand.
You understand that it populates a random phone number every single time you make a call using a Google Voice app.
I don't think it does. I think if you can use the same number, but if you
Sure.
delete it and then get into it, like I said, I'm not an expert on it. I haven't used it.
Okay.
I've
So
had
you
no
couldn't
need.
find the phone number. So let's turn to Buckle. So you said you weren't even certain that it was you. You did your best to identify which call it was, but you weren't actually certain which call it was. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. But the call that you think was the offending call was from a Google phone number,
yes,
but you were never able to trace that Google Voice number back to Mr. Hartman directly.
correct.
Okay. Likewise, with the call made to Paige, these multiple calls from different numbers, you weren't able to track them back to Mr. Hartman.
Correct.
Likewise, with Yvonne, that one call that was made, you weren't able to trace that to Mr. Hartman.
Correct.
And with these calls from Paige and Yvonne, was there any indication that that user was trying to make contact with Kate through those calls?
Kate was not mentioned in those calls.
Okay. And do you know if Kate, Paige, and Yvonne, I mean, isn't it possible? I mean, so they know each other, but I mean, they have a lot of different connections to a lot of different individuals. It's possible that they all have other Facebook friends in common, isn't it?
Yes,
Did you do any research to see how many other common Facebook friends they have? You said two of them were realtors. Isn't it possible that they have other friends in common?
yes,
Okay, so what you have here for Mr. Hartman that you're able to directly connect to him is that he goes to a gym in Vasa. That's one, yes.
yes,
Okay, and then that he at least at a minimum admitted to going to see if Kate was at work at Buckle. So he must have tried to go and visit her at Buckle, and you were able to establish that.
yes.
Okay, when he went to Buckle, was there, other than asking for Kate, was there anything illegal or of bad behavior that occurred other than seeking out Kate at Buckle?
Correct.
Okay. And was there, other than asking for Kate's phone number, let's turn to Vasa now. At Vasa, he asks for Kate's phone number and for some selfies, right?
Yes.
Is that illegal?
No.
Okay. Was there any threatening or even poor behavior between Mr. Hartman and Ms. Bell at Vasa?
Yes.
What's
When
that?
when he stated to her, you're going to get hurt because you are so pretty. I believe that is not appropriate. I believe that is partially threatening.
Okay. Do you know, were you there for that conversation?
No, I was not.
So you don't know the tone or anything really about that conversation other than what was relayed to you, right?
Correct.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for this witness.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Conyers. Mr. Ferris, any redirect?
No redirect, thank you. I would ask that Detective Haney be allowed to stay and help us coordinate alleged victim testimony.
Okay, Ms. Conyers, any objection to that?
No, absolutely not. Thank you for helping.
Okay. So Mr. Ferris, are you ready for your next witness?
Yes, please. The state would next call Kate Bell and remind Detective Haney that he would be allowed to mute his video while any of the three alleged victims are testifying.
Yes, I'm going to stop the video here and then I will go get Miss Bell.
Okay, thank you.
Did you get a microphone?
Just go ahead and sit down where you were before. Kate Bell is now back in the room, but again, we'll leave the video off.
Okay, thank you, Investigator Haney. Ms. Bell, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear to tell the truth and be accurate in today's proceeding?
Yes,
Okay, you can put your hand down and please state your name for the record. Okay, thank you, Ms. Bell. Right now, Mr. Ferris will ask some questions for you, and then there may be some cross-examination. Go ahead, Mr. Ferris.
Thank you. Ms. Bell, are you familiar with the offender that brings us here today for this hearing?
yes, I am.
And do you know their name?
Yes, I do. Cary Hartmann.
Okay, and could you tell us how you met him
I met him at the Vasa on Riverdale Road.
and approximately month and year?
I
that you
met him. I met him in 21, and it was right after COVID, and the gym just barely opened back up. So I'm uncertain of the month that I met him, but it was right after COVID.
Okay. And could you give us just a brief chronological narrative of your interaction with him in relation to the allegations that bring us here today in front of the
Yes, for
Board of
sure.
Control? Go ahead.
Thank you. I recognized a new face at the gym, and he was sitting on the bicycle with a trainer next to him, and he was there every morning for a week or so. And he said, "You have such a beautiful smile. I see that you come every day," and just was super friendly. And I'm a very friendly person, and I always want to be kind to everybody. And I got talking to him, and he acted as if he lost a wife or a sweetheart. And I felt bad for him. And I started bringing extra meals in a small cooler to the gym so that he could eat healthy. And I never interacted with him outside of the gym. It was just at the gym. And then I realized that there was some weird things that he would say and misleading things. And I just realized, okay, his story of having a wife, he didn't have a wife that he lost. And I thought maybe he has dementia because my mom has dementia. So I kind of see the signs. But as I continue to go to the gym, he would say sexual things to me, as far as, "You are so sexy, you are so pretty, you're gonna someday get hurt because of your prettiness," things like that, that triggered me into feeling like I don't know who he is, but I am very uncomfortable. And at the same time, I didn't know who he was. He had started coming into the Buckle and where I worked part-time. And I just, when I would go back to the gym, there was a few times that he got mad or seemed upset with me, I should say, because I was not at work like I said I would be. And I just realized like some of the things that was going on in my own like personal space that was starting to become weird or out of place for me, Cary Hartmann was in my life at that point, and I did not know who he was. But for instance, I had a hot dog in my mailbox, and I had things in my car. I had gone out to my car after the gym one day, and Cary was standing outside by my car, and he said, "Oh, I'm just going to put this note on your car because I didn't see you, to tell you goodbye," or just weird things that I realized, like, this is very uncomfortable for me. And then when I realized who he was, it started making sense of, um, you know, why I was feeling like I did and so uncomfortable with his sexual comments. How it finally ended was my husband finally approached him because Cary Hartmann was telling people at the gym that I was sleeping with him. And my husband put a stop to that.
Do you know if your
Is
husband,
there?
did your husband confront him personally?
Yes, my husband confronted him personally and said that he was never to speak to me or talk to me ever again, or there will be consequences.
And were you present for that?
I saw it. I was not standing next to him, but I could hear somewhat of the conversation, but I wasn't right next to him.
Okay. And you've talked about some of the comments that were made that made you feel uncomfortable. If you remember
Yes.
any of those, that would be important as we're trying to draw an accurate representation of how you felt at the time. Could you share those for us on the record?
Yes, he would just make comments as to how sexy I looked, how pretty I was, that I was going to get hurt because of how pretty I was, that he would tell me constantly on a weekly basis that I needed to watch my back because I was going to get hurt. And I would confront and say, I don't know what that means. So if you could please explain. But he never did. He just acted as if he was comfortable with saying those things and that I should know what he meant. I also recognized very closely, like, I looked in his eyes one day and he has pretty bright eyes. And that same day, he had pitch black eyes, and he said that Satan had visited him and the night before, and that I was going to get hurt and that I needed to watch my back. And it was that same week that I come out from working at the Buckle and approached my car and realized that there was sports tape that I had taken off of my shoulder that same day and put my gum in it at my house, and it was stuck to the back of my Porsche car seat. And it terrified me because I don't know how it got there, but I'm putting all these things together and I felt very threatened.
Did you do any investigating to find out more about who he was?
No, that's when I contacted a neighbor and just said, hey, I don't know, if this all correlates. And he's a police officer, Alexander Ellis. And he just says, let me get back to you. And that's when Steve Haney reached out to my husband and myself.
Okay. In the narrative we've been talking about, and I'm only asking for things that you remember. If there's anything I ask you, you don't remember, that's a fair answer. But in the narrative we have before us as part of this packet, there's an allegation of a phone call made to Buckle. Are you aware of any
Yes.
phone calls made by that are related to this case made to Buckle? I think you said yes, and I talked over you. Did you say yes?
Yes.
Okay, could you explain any of the details you know about the alleged phone call?
Yes. I was working and there was 2 other people working with me that day on the sales floor. And we had a incoming phone call and my sales associate said, Kate, the phone is for you. And it's very random that I ever get phone calls because I have a cell phone. And I said, it's for me. They asked for me specifically and they said yes. And so I answered the phone. It was a gentleman. He asked about the mannequin in the window, if it was for sale. And I said, we only sell clothes. I asked who it was. He wouldn't give me information. And then he stated inappropriate things. And I just hung up.
Sorry to badger you on this, but if you remember the inappropriate things, could you share those with us for the record?
It was related to underwear. And all I remember is that he asked me if something with underwear. And I just hung up.
Okay, thank you. So I think in the narrative you talked about you and your husband, or your husband reaching out to a neighbor who is in law enforcement, who then put you in touch with investigator Haney, who is there in the room with you. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And are you aware of any other behavior by Mr. Haney related to yourself, your family, friends, or relatives that is pertinent to what brings us here today?
I'm sorry, could you please repeat?
I think you
that?
mean Hartman, not Haney.
I am so sorry. Thanks for correcting me, Ms. Conyers. So my question to Kate is, are you aware of anything that Mr. Hartman may have said in relation to someone besides yourself, in relation to what brings us here today? So any of your friends or family that would have maybe had interactions with him? Are you aware of
Yes.
any?
Yes,
If
I
you
am.
remember them, could you share those with us?
Yes. So I have two friends, and Yvonne Tams and Paige Treasure, and they are both they both are realtors, and they both happened to make a comment or liked a Facebook post of mine. And it happened the same week. I was swimming with Yvonne Tams, and she just was telling me this crazy story that she got this prank call. And she said, when was the last time you ever got a prank call about like it being sexual or anything? And I'm like, never, not since I was in high school, because that just doesn't go on. And she said, yeah, well, me neither, until this situation. And she said he had called a person, it was a guy, had called, asked what she was wearing, asked inappropriate things, and it just spooked her out. And I just was thinking about everything that I had been going through. And I was just like, I just found it crazy. And I reported it to Steve Haney as being, I don't know if this is a coincidence or not, but just the things that had been going on in my life. And I felt like very much with Cary's comments, it could be very much related. So I just let Steve know. And then that same day that I let Steve know, I went and got my eyelashes done from Paige Treasure. And she opened up to me out of the blue and said, you'll never believe, I had the weirdest phone call and text messages. And she's like, I am freaked out. And I just was like, oh my gosh, do you care if I get a hold of Steve Haney and just let him know? It could be nothing related, or it could, but I wanted Steve to know that this had been going on with Paige.
Thank you. At any point, well, could you just tell us how you felt throughout the narrative that you've talked to us about, as far as your personal feelings towards Mr. Hartman?
My personal feelings towards Cary Hartmann is he is a predator. I really wanted to be a friend, or not necessarily a friend when I met him, but someone that he could come to the gym and say hi to. But he is a chameleon. He played very well, a guy that I felt like I could trust, that I could talk to about family or anything going on over the weekend or anything. But it turned sexual pretty dang fast, and I backed off, and he persisted. And that, to me, it left me feeling spooked out a lot and very uncomfortable.
Thank you. I appreciate you appearing today in honor of the subpoena that was sent to you. And Ms. Conyers, the other attorney, may have some questions for you, but I do appreciate you appearing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Bell, sorry, can you hear me, Ms. Bell?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just to follow up, when you say you backed off and the communication continued, did you actually ask him to stop having contact with you?
Yes, I did. I just had mentioned to him that I didn't appreciate his comments. It made me uncomfortable and that I wasn't interested in a friendship.
And did he continue talking to you after that?
Yes, he tried. He acted as if my comments didn't even exist. Like he acted like the same as he did, but not as much. Like he didn't talk to me like he used to, but he still tried to talk to me, if that makes sense.
I mean, I guess somewhat. After your husband had this conversation with him that you said occurred, you said he confronted him. Did he stop having contact with you?
Yes.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for Ms. Bell.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Ferris, any redirect?
None, thank you. And Ms. Bell is welcome to be released as far as the state's concerned, and we appreciate her appearance. And she's also welcome to remain if she so chooses.
Okay. Ms. Conyers, any objection to releasing Ms. Bell at this time?
No, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Bell, you are free to remain on the call if you would like to watch the remainder of the hearing, or if you need to go, you're excused and you can leave at this time. So the choice is yours, Ms. Bell.
Thank you. I will stay.
Okay. Mr. Ferris, your next witness.
The state would next call Page Treasure.
Okay, Investigator Haney, can you help us with Ms. Treasure?
Yes, just give me a moment. Just go ahead and sit where you were before. And then if you'll speak into the owl, that's where the microphone is. Yes. Okay, so we have Page Treasure in the room now.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Treasure, would you raise your right hand, please?
Yes,
Do you swear to tell the truth and be accurate in today's proceeding?
I do.
Okay, thank you. You can put your hand down. Please state your name for the record.
Page Treasure.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Ferris will have some questions for you, and then Ms. Conyers may have some cross-examination. Mr. Ferris?
Thank you. Ms. Treasure, are you familiar with, well, you're sitting in a room with her, I believe, but are you familiar with Kate Bell?
I am.
And is it fair to say that you're friends with her?
Yes.
Okay. And are you also familiar with at least some of the circumstances that bring us here today in this case in front of the Board of Pardons and Parole?
Yes.
And so my question is, any information that you have that would be helpful or maybe helpful in helping us understand the allegations here. So I guess I'd start with, have you had any interaction with the offender that brings us here today?
Yes, I do.
Could you tell us about that?
Yes. So we kind of connected the dots after Kate had her experience, but I received one inappropriate phone call that was asking me just inappropriate questions as far as sending inappropriate pictures or asking what I was wearing. And then I did have several text messages from different phone numbers that these phone numbers were always really weird phone numbers, not like the typical 801 or such phone numbers, but they would also be asking or requesting for inappropriate pictures. Lingerie was involved in those requests, asking what I was currently wearing. And I would get a text message. They would ask for those sort of things. And then a little bit of time would go by, a couple weeks, maybe a month or so. And then I would get another one. Sometimes it was only a few days in between these messages. But I received multiple numbers of texts asking for these kinds of things.
Okay, could you tell us approximately a time frame of when that was occurring?
During 2021 was the majority of these text messages, and I want to say February of 2022 was the last message that I received, but majority of these phone numbers were reaching me during 2021.
Okay, and how did you and Ms. Bell come to compare notes and find out that you had something in common related to the case?
She had told me about this guy that she had met at the gym, just telling me how she was kind of feeling inappropriate. And after time went by, I had started receiving these text messages, and this phone call. So I had seen Kate and we were talking about it, and I kind of, like I said, connected the dots, and I just was telling Kate, like, I've been receiving some really weird messages, and I received this weird phone call. Like, what are the odds, you know? So as I was telling her the context of these text messages, Kate then was like, would you be willing to talk with Steve about this? Because I'm concerned that this could be related.
Okay, and do you, is there any connection between Kate and how anyone would have been able to get your phone number?
Kate and I are friends on Facebook. We're Facebook friends, and her and I have commented on each other's pictures or posts. So, I mean, by the odds that Cary had seen, you know, one of my comments on Kate's Facebook, the industry that I'm in, unfortunately, it's very easily accessible to receive my phone number and know how to contact me.
Can you tell us what that industry is?
Real estate.
Okay, so if someone were friends with Kate Bell, for instance, and Kate Bell was friends with you, then potentially, are you saying that you would have contact information, like something denoting you as a real estate person with your phone number on your Facebook?
Yes.
Okay, and did that play into you and Kate comparing notes about your phone calls about lingerie?
Later on, yes, but I had already discussed with her the text messages and the phone call that I had received, and then we pieced it together that it was most likely coming from Facebook and how accessible my phone number is from Facebook.
Thank you. Thanks for appearing in response to this subpoena that was sent to you. I appreciate it, and I have no further questions at this time.
Thank you.
Can I cross momentarily?
Sorry, I was muted there. Go ahead, Ms. Conyers.
Okay, thank you. Just briefly, were you, it sounds like you received at least one phone call and multiple text messages. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Were you able to link this phone call and text messages to each other to confirm that they were from only one person?
I did not reach into it that far, but I did send them to Steve. They were all different phone numbers, every single one that would message me, but they were all like really weird phone numbers, like a Google phone number, or they weren't typical phone numbers.
Okay, so, but no way of knowing with much certainty whether they were from one person or multiple people. Is that fair
Sure.
to say? Okay. And you did not, to your knowledge, you nor Investigator Haney Detective Haney were able to confidently confirm that they were Mr. Hartman. Is that also fair to say?
Um, that's outside of my knowledge. I'm not too sure what happened with that.
Okay, that's okay. That's all the questions I have, and I have no purpose. She can be excused if the Mr. Ferris is okay.
Okay. Mr. Ferris, any redirect on that?
Yes, just one question, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Clarification. Ms. Treasurer, did you testify that when you had spoke to Kate Bell about these, I guess I would call them prank phone calls or suspicious phone calls, that you hadn't had anything like that happen to you since high school?
I'd never had anything happen like that to me before, no.
Okay. And could you just tell us if you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s?
30s.
Okay. And so at the time that you had this conversation with Kate back in 2021, you hadn't had anything like this happen, but when it happened, some would even say maybe a coincidence, but it was the same time that Kate was telling you the story about her interaction at VASA. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
No further redirect.
Okay.
No
Ms.
follow-up.
No follow-up? Okay. Mr. Ferris, any comment on excusing Ms. Treasurer?
We have no objection to excusing her and appreciate her appearing.
Okay. And Ms. Conyers had previously said no objection to that. Okay, Ms. Treasurer, you're welcome to remain on the call and observe if you like, or if you need to, you're welcome to be excused. The choice is yours if you want to remain.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Ferris?
Thank you. The state would now call Yvonne Tams.
Okay. Investigator Haney, can you help us with Ms. Tams?
Yes, just give me a moment. Go ahead. Yeah, so right here's just on the owl, there's the microphone, so just talk towards that. Hey, Yvonne Tams is in the room.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Tams, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear to tell the truth and be accurate in today's proceeding?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. You can put your hand down. Would you please state your name for the record?
Yvonne Tams.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Ferris, we'll have some questions for you, and then there may be some cross-examination from Ms. Conyers. Go ahead, Mr. Ferris.
Thank you. Ms. Tams, could you tell us can you tell us how you first met Kate Bell?
Gosh, years and years ago, probably 15, 20 years ago, we became neighbors.
Okay. And your name has come up previously, and obviously you received a subpoena to be here today in relation to the events that bring us here. Can you tell us what your understanding is of why you received a subpoena to be here today?
I just had a coincidental phone call that was disturbing around the same time that things were going on that were disturbing in the case here.
Okay, could you tell us approximately when that would have been?
2021 is, it's been several years ago now, so it was probably summertime of 2021.
Okay, thank you. If you could be as specific as you can, if you do remember, tell us about a suspicious interaction.
I received a phone call, somebody just saying, hey, Yvonne, you know who this is, don't you? And I said no, and just kind of a cordial conversation have kept, going on of, yes, you do. You remember me. And, I deal in the public and people call me all the time for real estate needs. I'm a realtor. And so I thought this was somebody that was reaching out and maybe just knew me in the past and was just being teasing and playful. And so I, of course, kept talking. And then I believe it went something to very disturbing. Well, I'm masturbating to your underwear right now, something like that, which I immediately hung up.
Thank you. What did you do after that happened?
I was laying in bed next to my husband and just was like, that was really creepy. And we actually have a good friend who works for the FBI on a task force. And so I took the number to him and asked him if I could trace a call or what I could do to find out who that was or see what was, where that came from, to see if they were a threat in my life, that somebody I knew. And basically I was told it was a Google number.
Okay. And did you share your story with Kate at any point?
Yes, I believe it was a week or two later. We were at a pool party of one of our friends, and it somehow came up that was, I says, oh yeah, I got a gross phone call or something. And I was just telling a group of girls, 3 or 4 of us. And that's when Kate kind of said what was going on in her life and that she had another friend that had received the same phone call. And so, we were just like, oh, that's really creepy.
Okay. And how are you Facebook friends with Kate?
Yes.
And is there any way that if someone were to access her Facebook, would they be able to find your phone number?
Absolutely, because I am a realtor and I share properties for sale all the time. I keep my Facebook public, and I also have my phone number on my Facebook to contact me for properties. So I'm kind of exposed that way. But yes, you could definitely find me through friends because I have all avenues open.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you responding to the subpoena and being here today and answering my questions. I don't have any further questions currently.
Okay, Ms. Conyers?
Just briefly, Ms. Tams, you said that your FBI colleague was able to trace the number to a Google number. Were they able to identify who owned that phone number or who utilized it?
No, he said it was somebody that knew what they were doing because it was untraceable the way they had called me.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for Ms. Tams.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ferris, any redirect as a result of that question?
None, thank you.
Okay, anything further for this witness?
Nothing from the state.
Okay, Ms. Conyers?
No, and she can be excused as
Okay.
far as I care.
All right, Ms. Tams, you're free to remain on the call and observe if you like, or if you need to be excused, that's fine. The choice is yours, whether you want to remain or not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ferris?
I'm sure there'll be questions for Agent Adair during the disposition phase, assuming we get there, but I'd like to call him as a witness to ask him a couple questions, please.
Okay. Agent Adair, let's go ahead and swear you in. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear to tell the truth and be accurate in today's proceeding?
I do.
Okay, thank you. You can put your hand down. Please state your name for the record.
Brandon Adair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ferris?
Thank you. Agent Adair, could you tell us where you're employed?
I work with Ogden Adult Probation Parole. I'm out of the Ogden office.
Thank you. And approximately how long have you been so employed?
With the APP, I've been about 3.5 years.
Okay. Do you have previous law enforcement or corrections experience?
Corrections.
And where at?
I worked Idaho State Corrections from 2014 through 2017, and then end of 2017 to 2020.
Thank you. And have you supervised the offender that brings us here today?
I did.
And can you tell us his name just for the record?
Cary Hartmann.
Thank you. And so you've been in a position as my chief officer, since you're the one who brought the allegations, and you're also you also have experience in supervising Mr. Hartman. And so I would just like to ask, are you familiar with the underlying charges that put Mr. Hartman in prison in the first place?
Yes.
And could you tell us those?
They were sexual in nature. I believe it was for rape, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, and as you've heard the testimony here today, has anyone's testimony, are any of the people who testified, are their allegations in any way related to experience you've had with Mr. Hartman?
So throughout my supervision with Mr. Hartman, I would get quite a few phone calls, rather from Ogden Police Department, regarding Cary's location. And then I'd also received a couple different phone calls from civilians who stated that Cary was being inappropriate with them. They didn't want to file charges. They didn't want to submit a police report. And so in speaking with Cary, we had him removed from a culinary school. We've had him removed from a pickleball court due to his discussions with other females.
Okay, and are those discussions in any way related to lingerie?
Not lingerie, but in sexual nature, that he would ask them. There's one time where he asked a woman at a pickleball court, or someone next to him heard him say that he would like to get a piece of that or get at that. And that was at a pickleball court, and that's what led to us having him removed from that area.
Okay, so did those experiences contribute at all to you bringing the allegations that you bring us here today?
So then after I arrested Cary for his parole violations, I was contacted by Steve Haney, who then gave me the additional information that I filed.
Thank you. And so as we look at this today, and you heard my opening statement where I talked about we only have allegation 4 in front of us. It's not a new crime per se, because no criminal charges have come from it. So some people might say, okay, you have an allegation of a technical violation of stalking or stalking behavior. Is that fair?
Yes.
Why should the board take that serious, if they should?
Pertaining to his alleged first time that he went to prison, and going through his packet that he submitted, viewing pornography was a big thing that led him to pursue and go after women, which led to his crime.
And you had information that he was relapsing and falling back into pornography. Is that fair?
Yes.
And you put that in your warrant request, didn't you?
I did, yes.
And did you even go so far as to say that he is, Mr. Hartman had said that pornography is his drug of choice?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's important to you when someone is, his track record, and then he says that to you. What obligation do you have as his agent to do with that information, if any?
Well, it goes against his treatment guidelines. It goes against his group conditions. And so whenever there's pornography, we try and help them, try and minimize, trying to create a safety plan. If the behavior consists, then we don't have many more options.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions of Agent Adair for this portion of the hearing, but I'd ask him to remain for the duration. Okay. Ms. Conyers?
I just have one, and it's a bit related, but I'll go ahead and ask it. Is it a parole violation to have a Google phone number?
So if you're on the sex offender registry and you are using a phone number that is not listed, then yeah, then we're looking at new criminal charges, parole violations at that point. Having a Google phone number is not directly a violation. I would, if I knew that he had a Google phone number, that would be a discussion for us to have. Why are you having this? What are you using it for?
And is it registered, right? If
And
it's on
is
the
it
registry.
registered?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Okay. Mr. Ferris, any redirect on that?
None, thank you.
Okay. So Agent Adair, please stay on the line while we go ahead with this hearing. Mr. Ferris, anything else?
No further witnesses for the state.
Okay. Ms. Conyers?
Yes, I do recognize we are quite short of time, but if I may briefly, can I get a breakout with Mr. Hartman to see if he would like to testify?
Okay. That is fine. UDC, if you'll please start working on that breakout. For the rest of you on the call, you're welcome still to remain, and please do so. We'll just remain in this room. Corrections will move Mr. Hartman and his attorney to a separate room, and then they'll come back. While they're gone, we won't be talking with each other or discussing the case. So let's move to the breakout room now, please.
And I realized it just faded to black right there. And that's when the hearing cut out. So he ultimately decided not to come up and make a comment. And the state of Utah did revoke his parole. But listen to this. He has a rehearing in February of 2025. So it's possible by the time you're watching this that he already has a rehearing, and we're going to cover it for you. So you can check the comment section below. It will be pinned if you want to see if they decide to parole him again. Keep in mind, this is a convicted serial. I hate saying the word because of the YouTube algorithm, but I think you know what I mean, right? And he was a police officer. And we'll read through just one of these court documents that was depicted on how violent and brutal just one of his essays were. Keep in mind as well that he was sentenced to how many life sentences, how many hundreds of years, but Utah paroles him. And this just goes to show for all of you out there saying, oh, come on, this was a crime they committed back in the day. Surely age will wear him out. Surely he can't be a risk. And here he is, finding out how to use Google numbers to create multiple different types of phone numbers so that he can call them and stalk them, going right back to his old pedigree. He was sentenced, let's see, in 1987 for aggravated essay, 15 to 100 years, aggravated burglary, 5 to 100 years, essay, 100 years, all to run consecutively, and but I'm sure he had a low risk score assessment, so he paroled him. Why not? It's not the first time we have covered a serial killer who had a parole hearing. We have a couple of them actually. It's quite disturbing. We covered one guy out of Connecticut who he was 18 at the time, and they found his neighbor, a woman, dead. She was like in her late 80s. Then a month later, his other neighbor in her late 80s was killed, but they found that she was essayed. Then they became suspicious, so they exhumed the body of the other 80-year-old woman and discovered that she too had been essayed, and they caught him because of that. And they realized, hey, you're the one that was breaking into these 80-plus-year-old women's homes, essaying them and killing them. A very dangerous type of person. Well, they paroled him as well. Very able-bodied, strong. And then he disappeared. Just disappeared because he had an ankle monitor. He took it off and disappeared. And when they revoked him, we have that parole hearing. I'll try to remember to put a link to that in the description. And they just gave him a small sanction, even though, to think that surely someone like that doesn't have hard, deep issues and should and we should protect society from their grasp. But no. What do we know? We're just sheeple. So Here's how violent, just one of his crimes. Remember that there was 14, I think the number's right, unsolved essays still, and the unsolved murder. And it was his girlfriend that was murdered. So, I mean, why would it have been him? Now, in the early morning hours of May 16, 1986, CB fell asleep on her living room couch while watching late-night movie on television. She was awakened by the sound of the television set being turned off. When CB opened her eyes, she saw a stranger standing across the living room. She lay awake watching the intruder for a moment and then called out, "Ben, is that you?" This isn't funny, I mean, this is how a horror movie starts. This is exactly how a terror movie starts. At that point, the defendant ran towards CB and told her that he was not Ben and that he had a weapon. He instructed CB not to piss around or to make noise and warned her that if her children awoke and came down the hall, he would have to blow their heads off. The defendant then grabbed CB and forced her to engage in this. I'm not gonna read it, but you can see that because that's totally not psychopathic. And then throughout the attack, the defendant carried a vulgar dialogue with CB. If she resisted or tried to pull away from him, the defendant repeated his threats to her children. Hartmann contends on appeal that there was insufficient evidence to establish that he committed the crimes. He reviewed a claim of insufficient evidence, blah, blah, blah. And this is an appeal. I'll put the link in the description. Now, oftentimes, I'll do like a deep unpacking. We'll go through all the information. But first, I want to give a special thank you to Sir Richard. This was actually the third hearing that he had in Utah. He had this preliminary hearing and then another preliminary hearing. But for me to have played it for you would have been redundant. It only made sense to show finally this third and final hearing. And then Sir Richard, he waited, because he's kind of like a producer almost, the way he puts these things together in the spreadsheets and then the articles, and then says, "Mandu, go cover this." There are so many links. There are so many articles. There is so much that, here's another article I could share with you. And this was written in, let's see what this is written in 1991. Man convicted of SA says WSU Crime Lab lost evidence that could have cleared him. So he goes on trying to say how he's innocent because they lost evidence and that he didn't do the crimes, the DNA, and of course, right, it's only evidence that they lose that he's able to claim about this, right? Here's why in his record it shows that he only has SA, because Hartmann is serving mandatory minimum 15 to life sentence in Iron County facility. He was convicted in 1987 of SA in an Ogden woman, later pled guilty to second SA in exchange for charges in 2 other SA burglaries being dropped. Hartmann has repeatedly said he's innocent. The evidence in question of gas killer samples of Hartmann contends the swab, if analyzed in DNA, it would prove he did not SA the woman. It's just terrifying. Why would you ever parole a man like this? How does that happen? How does it happen? Here's something where this is somewhat recently, December 6, 2022. New development. Suspect in missing woman case recently failed a polygraph. So for whatever reason, he agreed to take a polygraph when he was out. A suspect in a nearly 40-year-old Utah cold. And by the way, I'll tell you, I don't take the polygraph seriously because if he had passed the polygraph, I would have said, I don't care that he passed it. And if he fails it, I think it's more like a good tool to use. Like they would have said, "Oh, you failed it, hoping he'll make a confession." But it's just my opinion on the case. I have to be, if you care to hear my opinion. The Webb County's attorney office made the offer to Cary Hartmann in a letter. The letter said Hartmann could receive immunity in exchange for information about the disappearance of Shireen Warren and the location of her identifiable remains. So can you believe they paroled a man who they believe killed her? And but then he took let's see what happened. KLS Cold Podcast obtained a copy of the immunity letter through a public records request. Hartmann, a former Ogden Police Reserve officer, served 32 years in prison on an unrelated SA conviction and was released in custody in March of 2020. He received the immunity offer letter during a meeting in Weber County Investigator about a year later in April of 2021. The letter said that the offer was conditional on Hartmann providing full, complete, and truthful information, but did not depend on the successful recovery of her remains. This agreement shall not be void if such remains are not found, the letter stated. Hartmann declined to sign the letter, which would have been necessary to make the offering binding. Warren disappeared on October 2nd, 1985, after leaving an office building in Salt Lake City. She was living with her parents in Roy at the time while pursuing a divorce from her husband. Cary Hartmann was dating Sheree Warren at the time of her disappearance. Wow, who would have thought? Huh? Hartmann has repeatedly denied involvement in Warren's suspected murder. Hartmann is currently on parole in his 1987 conviction of aggravated SA, assault and burglary. He was required to submit a polygraph examination about Warren's disappearance as a condition of his parole. Oh, this is interesting. That's why he did it. On condition of parole, he had to do a polygraph. Isn't that interesting? That's fascinating. And he did fail the polygraph test. KSL requested copies of the polygraph report under Utah's open record laws, but Roy police refused to provide them. Hartmann has not subsequently been charged with the crime related to Warren's presumed death. When contact makes KSL, blah, blah, blah. So this is, I think what we would call the epitome of true crime. For those of you who are, I think everyone here is a true crime person. We literally just watched the parole revocation hearing of a serial SA similar to the Golden State Killer, right? Still trying to solve and figure out an unsolved homicide, which, come on, I mean, all fingers are pointing to the one man who, and we're going to see him again. Now, I'm going to stop it here. We've been going for quite some time, but I mean, it's I do want to give a shout out to the woman who came up and testified, to the detective who came up, to really the parole officer. Everyone's trying to do their job. I'll even give a shout out to his defense attorney. I mean, I guess, hey, she's got to do the best she can. I've thought about this for a little while. I said, how could you be a defense attorney for someone like this? And I get it that you need the wills to go around, you need proper but here's one thing that I came up with that can help justify it for me. So if I was a defense attorney for a monster, and I had to, and I felt like the way I would justify it is I would say, I need to do my best job possible so that he can't have any type of appeal that I failed him, right? So that's how I would probably look at it. So by doing the best job possible, you're actually ensuring that he'll stay locked up, because you know that the evidence is overwhelming and he's going to get locked up anyway. So now it's your job to do your job. I try. But how terrifying. How terrifying. Just being those women and coming out and he's there by the car. And he's calling up, and there was, maybe I should share that in one of the articles in the arrest warrant, they found a book of him he had made, they went through his phone records, and he had made thousands of phone calls to women that they turned out it was to women. And here it is. Let me share this with you, because this is pretty crazy. It's crazy to point out how his crimes are basically the same, just more advanced now with Google numbers. So Detective Zimmerman asked a judge for permission to monitor Cary's home phone number beginning November of 1986 in his application for a pen register device. Zimmerman wrote, Hartmann has a deviant sexual preference similar to those of suspect in recent series Ogden City. Zimmerman also noted that Hartmann lived with close proximity to the victims. The judge approved the request in a formal report. Zimmerman wrote he monitored Cary's phone number by pen register from November 23, 1986 through the end of December 1986. He made an approximate 1,900 phone calls. 200 of the calls were for friends or acquaintances. The others were picked at random, going through a phone book and picking a last name with girls' first names. And this is only This would be 1,700 calls from November to December. That's 1 month. 1,700 phone calls. Pen registered devices did not record the content of the phone calls. They only captured the numbers dialed. This meant that Zimmerman was not able to listen to what he had said on those calls. Instead, he had to himself call numbers observed on the pen registered to speak to the woman who answered. Some described having received obscene lingerie survey phone calls from an unidentified man. What is this word? Zimmerman also confirmed speaking with multiple victims from serial sexual assault investigations that some of them had received these calls prior to being attacked. Is it? One of the women who reported being attacked also told Zimmerman she'd gone to a bar called the Galleon where Cary Hartmann worked. She heard Cary's voice on the intercom and recognized it as the same man who essayed her. Zimmerman presented his findings in Weber County. Attorney Reed Richards, who agreed. So, and then he's back at the same thing, creating phone numbers and making calls. It's just insane. And they paroled him. And now he has another hearing coming up in a month. So there you go. Thank you, Sir Richard. I'll put links in the description. And with that, I'll let you go.
How pretty I was, that I was going to get hurt because of how pretty I was, that he would tell me constantly on a weekly basis that I needed to watch my back because I was going to get hurt. And I would confront and say, I don't know what that means. So if you could please explain. But he never did. He just acted as if he was comfortable with saying those things and that I should know what he meant. I also recognized very closely, like I looked in his eyes one day and he has pretty bright eyes. And that same day he had pitch black eyes, and he said that Satan had visited him and the night before, and that I was going to get hurt and that I needed to watch my back.